Good morning, my name is Konrad Blaszkiewicz. I'm co-founder of Murmuras. I will present you about smartphone behavior during coronavirus pandemic. In particular, we'll talk about how people in Germany use smartphone apps in the year 2020. This work I will presenting was done by me, Clara, Qais, Johnny and Alex. We are all part of Murmuras. Murmuras IT startup based in Bonn. We are founded in year 2019. We build technology which allows academic institutions as well as market researchers to collect and analyze smartphone usage data. Our solution consists of app as well as number of web platforms. We are fully GDPR compliant. We take great care of in data privacy, user privacy. We collect data only for status study purposes. All data is stored securely on our servers in Germany. Our technology is based on the project Mental, a big study run at University of Bonn by us with over 700,000 participants. It's running since 2014 and captured a lot of media attention. It also collected one of the world's largest and richest human mobile phone behavior datasets. Our technology is used by a number of researchers in a variety of fields, studying depression, sleep, nutrition, smartphone addiction, but also ministries looking at public transport optimization and planning, and market research companies analyzing ads and consumer behavior. What data do we collect? Main part of Murmuras is smartphone app, which collects different types of data. Data can be categorized in four main categories. The first category is app sessions. This is the base level, and this is also the level that we will focus the most during this presentation. Here we look at how when different apps were started and when they finish, and what were their sequences. Next level is in-app data. So here we can see stuff that's happening inside the application. This could involve like ads or Facebook posts seen or interacted with, all the likes, clicks, shares, as well as searches or purchases. Next level is location data, which provides some kind of real-world context to the digital data we captured on the levels above. This type of data we will discuss briefly in this presentation when we talk about coronavirus app. Finally, we capture smart survey data. We can context questionnaires based on the behavioral data. Here, in case of this study, we didn't use any fancy triggers, but had only questionnaires at the beginning and end of the study. So what was the sample used in our study? We observed behavior of 1,070 participants in Germany. After some data cleaning, we excluded faulty questionnaires and people not contributing data. We are left with 990 participants. Total time capture was over 49,000 days. On average, that was 50 days per user. So not all the users stayed with us all the time. Here this plot shows us how many people we capture in different months of year 2020. Average phone usage we captured was almost 4 hours in exactly 232 minutes. This means that we captured over 9,000 days of poor usage within our data. Now let's look at some demographic properties of our sample. Our users were predominantly female. This was 60% of our users. And they were usually young, in their 20s or 30s, with some users also in the older age groups, as well as some users younger than 20. Okay, now let's look what were the top apps for top Android smartphone apps for year 2020 in Germany. The top app was, and actually still is, and kept this place for a good 8 years, WhatsApp. It was used on average on 35 minutes per day. It is followed by Instagram, YouTube, Chrome, and Facebook. The apps which come later cover only up to 5 minutes of usage on average. This is quite interesting. We see that these apps don't follow linear trend. Actually, they follow a trend which is very popular for this kind of distribution with very long tail, where there's a lot of apps which cover small percentage of user and only few apps which are really used by practically everyone. Interestingly, the top 5 apps which are feature the most significantly in our dataset are created by only 2 companies. So we have WhatsApp, Instagram, and Facebook, which are owned by Facebook, and Chrome and YouTube, which are owned by Google. These 2 companies control over 2 hours of phone usage on average. Okay, now let's see how women and men use their phones differently. We can see that while top 10 stays quite similar, there are some differences in how different app ranks. For example, for men, we see there's Pokemon Go in top 10 apps, while there's no such app in female top 10. Interestingly, for the most popular apps, there are quite some differences. WhatsApp, Facebook, and Instagram are used more by females. This difference is biggest for Instagram, for which women use it almost twice as much as men. Age also makes a very large difference in what apps are used. Here we see that WhatsApp is consistently popular among all the age groups, but the story is completely different from YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. While Instagram is very popular among our youngest users, as well as users in their early 20s, Facebook is most popular in users with 20s. YouTube has a profile which is similar to Instagram, but also dominates more user is dominated by users in their early 20s. Another perspective is looking at apps of users who are students. So we capture 482 such users and users who are employees. Here we see again similar rankings, but the positions are completely different. So we see while WhatsApp stays in both groups on top, for students the second is Instagram, which is used on average for 32 minutes per day. Also, usage of YouTube is over 31 minutes per day. Those numbers are much lower for employed people who prefer to use Facebook. To see what effects coronavirus had on app usage, we have to take into account time perspective. The plots shows the relationship how phone usage on average for our users change in different times of year 2020. So the daily phone usage stayed around the level of 232 minutes, which was the average. But for the first few months of year 2020, we've seen a huge increase. The increase happened in the first weeks of March and continue with higher usage in March and April. We see that in average, users used their phones for over 20 minutes more during spring months than in the previous months. When we look at how this breaks down into specific apps, we see that usage of WhatsApp increased from 31 minutes in February to 38 and 39 minutes in March and April. Similarly, there was a significant increase in usage of Instagram. Interestingly, YouTube haven't seen the increase in March, but we've seen later increase in April and May. These trends also generalized broader into app categories. So here we see that communication app, which will include WhatsApp, but also Facebook Messenger and other communicators, increase in March and April. While social apps see similar trend. Social app category include Facebook, Instagram, and other social networks. And video entertainment category, which includes such apps as Amazon Prime, Netflix, or YouTube, see again a similar trend to the ones we observed for YouTube app. Okay, now let's bring it into longer perspective. So in the spring months, this was the time when we've seen coronavirus cases picking up in Germany, with the peak actually happening at the end of March 2020. Months of March and April were marked by strict lockdown measures. Everybody was social distancing, and people seemed to replace a lot of their in-person interactions with online interactions. That's our hypothesis for the growth we've seen in social and media and communication apps. But we see no such strong effects for later lockdown period happening at the end of the year 2020, in autumn. One has to remember that this time was the time of light lockdown, which wasn't so strict. But back then we see no significant increase in communication app usage. We see again increase in social network usage, and we see some increase in media and video usage in this month. Finally, we wanted to show some interesting features of the data we capture. So app usage data can give you some kind of interesting proxies for different types of data. As mentioned before, we collected location data, but what we found out is that usage of some apps like Google Maps correlate very well with actual distance traveled by people, and can be used as some kind of proxy for this kind of data. Finally, when talking about coronavirus and top apps, we cannot not mention Coronavirus. Coronavirus was official Germany app to fight spread of coronavirus. It became hugely popular also by some government mandate. But in the summer, most of these users were actually self-selected. We focus on these users. So here we looked at 660 users we captured during summer months, from July until September, who used coronavirus apps, as well as its counterparts who didn't have it installed. We found that coronavirus apps on average traveled more by 4 kilometers. Also, their average daily travel area, which means the largest distance, radius of the distance traveled during a day, was larger. They stay less often within 1 kilometer of their household, and traveled more to further places. This could mean that actually coronavirus app users were more cautious in a way that they knew their behavior, and they tried to remedy it by using the app. So I hope they give you some interesting insights. What kind of information does the smartphone usage data brings? Thank you very much for your attention. I'm looking forward to your research questions. I'm Konrad again. You can reach me at konrad@murmuras.com. I also invite you to see a presentation of my colleague Qais tomorrow. Thank you. Bye.